and Miska University. Sheikh Abdurrahman Badawi was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. After finishing high school in New York, he pursued an Islamic education in Al-Qura University in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, where he originally studied the Arabic language before moving on to a fiqh-based degree. He has an associate's degree in Arabic language as well as bachelor's degree in Islamic law and legal theory. Sheikh Abdurrahman is now back in New York serving as a youth development leader at Mass Brooklyn in Staten Island. So please give him a
Appreciate it. Thank you, brothers and sisters. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We begin, as always, of course, in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla wa anta taj'al al-hazna idha shi'ta sahla. So, what is the theme of our conference? What is the title? Liberated minds, liberated souls. Alright, I'm not, as those who are familiar with me know, that I'm not a big fan of a lot of buzzwords, a lot of cool little titles and tags. They're good to start with, but typically we just end there. So what does it mean to you? Let's start there. What does it mean to you? When you hear liberated minds, liberated souls, it's a very cool, catchy title. What does it mean? What does a liberated mind mean? What does a liberated soul? Why did they say it twice? Is it just two of the same thing? Let's hear some thoughts. I saw a hand, and then it went down. Yeah. Let's do it. Yes?
I think it represents someone who's like free to think for themselves and to know what they want in this life and to not be victim to like just following the sheep, like following as a sheep.
Okay, excellent. Free to think. So let's shorten as much as we can. Freedom to think. Great. What else? Liberated mind, liberated soul. Freedom to think, don't be just a follower. So you're saying you're following up, you're correlating. When you're free to think, it will be, most likely you are not going to be a follower just following the trend and the crowd. Okay, great. What else? Brothers, when you came to this conference, correct? You bought a ticket. When you saw that title, what made you say, oh, this is something I'd like to hear about? Or are we just following the crowd, huh? Yeah, I hear it. Yes, I saw another hand. Yes.
You can only know who you are as an individual by submitting to Allah first, because that's what liberation means, but all about the individual self.
Okay, so on an individual level, so liberation, as you're understanding it, still requires submission. So the concept of freedom, as one of our speakers, I think it was Imam Suhaib, who mentioned that you're always subservient to something. Do you guys agree with that notion? No matter what you're created, just the nature of your being, the nature of our dunya, you're going to be submitting to something or the other. And the true liberated soul is somebody who has grasped that fact and chose to channel their subservience to God, the ultimate creator, Al-Haq, the truth, the one, the ultimate one, right? Al-Samad. So that is true liberation, is understanding your nature and channeling it properly. I like it. What else? Guys, I want to hear something from here. Liberated mind, liberated soul. How about I change the question up? Liberated mind, liberated soul. Are they two different things, or did they just repeat themselves twice because it was catchy? I hear two different things. I'll get here in a second. These guys are not giving me anything. Let's do it.
Come on.
Nothing.
I say nothing. No.
What's the difference between a liberated mind and a liberated soul? Yeah, you went to English class. Try something. Wow. All right. Yes, sister. Are they the same thing or are they different? Someone said they're different. It was in this. Yes.
I think they're different, but kind of connected, because if you have a liberated mind, that will lead you to a liberated soul.
Absolutely. So which is greater as Muslims? What do we understand? The mind or the soul? The soul, you can make an argument, it's all intertwined, it's all in the same. But at the end of the day, the ruh, the soul, is mentioned very vividly, very clearly in the Quran, is our true being. This body that we are, it's a vehicle that we are living in. This body that we are in is a vehicle, flesh and blood and bones, and it's gonna disintegrate. It gets weaker, or stronger, whatever direction by the year. At some point, you leave the body, your soul goes on forever, right? So, and again, liberated mind, liberated soul, they are intertwined and connected. But the idea is, as our Sheikh Suhaib mentioned earlier, and that was Sheikh Shinawi as well, is the concept of education or knowledge leading to freedom, liberation. Knowledge, we all know the expression, knowledge is power. Do you agree or disagree? If you agree, raise your hand. Knowledge is power. All right, excellent. Let me hear somebody say, why do you agree that knowledge is power? Yes?
It can be contained.
It cannot be contained. Great. What else? Yes?
I mean, based on observation, it seems like the empires or the countries that have the strongest educational institutions, they're usually the strongest militarily, economically, so on and so forth. Like this country, we have Harvard, Columbia, all the top schools, and we see that America really kind of rules the world. in a way, so.
Anybody who has spent a minute in history has realized or seen the connection between a population that gets educated and a population that grows and gets stronger, and gets wealthier, and gets protected. So there's that connection anywhere you look. You can look at it individually, a person who's educated becomes better off, or you can look at it on societal level, etc., etc. Knowledge is power in part because it gives you options. It gives you choices. The more educated you are, the more choices you have, the more abilities you have now, and you can branch out, and you can move on. And knowledge gives you information that you didn't have to wait to experience yourself. So if you're studying, we have an education system, whatever it is. Obviously, when we talk about scholars, our topic today, by the way, I didn't mention it, is our imprisoned scholars and the concept of liberation in terms of Islamic scholarship. Ulama ad-din. Of course, knowledge in all branches in general liberates you, but we want to focus on Islamic scholarship and getting closer to Allah and so on and so forth. So knowledge gives you understanding of things you didn't have to wait to experience yourself. Because if you're the kind of person who is so intellectually limited that you wait until you've experienced it individually yourself, you're going to have very, very limited life. A very simple, surface level life. Versus somebody who has lived 100 lives and 1,000 lives because they've read the stories of 100 people and 1,000 people. And they've read the stories of entire civilizations. And they get to see the patterns, and they get to see the growth, what makes something grow, what makes something shrink, what makes something better, what makes something worse. And that's where knowledge is power comes from. Is that this person is way ahead of the person sitting next to them who's read Dr. Seuss. And the person next to them has read encyclopedias and histories of civilizations. This person is going to make patterns, and this person is going to see a greater path than the one next to them. So obviously, the first word in our deen that was revealed is Iqra. We are the Ummah of Iqra. And as one of my teachers always said, I wasn't fond of it back then in high school, but I am fond of it now. He used to say, Ummat Iqra la taqra. The nation of Iqra the nation of read does not read. And that's where we land ourselves, where we are today. Okay. So we're talking about knowledge being liberation, being power, being freedom. Does having knowledge make you free? Does simply having knowledge make you free? If you say no, if you say yes, raise your hand. I want to suggest by starting with no. You say, does having knowledge make you free? Alright, I see a yes here. Another one, 3. If you say no, raise your hand. Okay, so the yes can support your answer.
Abu Bakr's hadith was like, life of the mind is knowledge. And so I feel like when you truly understand who Allah is and who the Prophet is, like Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, he was in prison his whole life, but like he found freedom in his knowledge, in his books. And as someone who I consider myself a student of knowledge, I feel like when you truly understand the depth of it, like that's all you need. Like that's how I see it.
Okay. Great. So the second camp who said, sorry, just for the sake of time, we gotta move on a little bit. But for the second camp who said simply having knowledge does not make you free. Let's hear a voice from here. Why do you say no? Yes.
Interesting that the sister mentioned Ibn Taymiyyah because he was also known. I believe I heard Ibn Taymiyyah, right?
Yes.
Okay, so he was also known for fighting the Mongols as well because of the knowledge that he had. It informed me that knowledge on its surface is not enough. Action has to follow knowledge.
Perfect. So obviously the suggestive way in which I worded the question was enough to let you know exactly where I was headed with it. So, but the sister chose to challenge the sister, so that I can really appreciate that, going against the grain. But yes, of course, knowledge requires a second necessary step, which is found in the ayah or the phrasing that Allah uses in the Quran over and over and over again. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Those who believe and do good deeds. It's not enough to say الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, those who believe in their heart, and left it there. And of course, you get in discussion about belief also manifests in actions and so on and so forth. Those who believe and do good deeds, Allah just made it very clear to you. Those who believe and do good. So you believe, you've acknowledged, you've gained the knowledge of faith, you've gained the knowledge of what Allah wants you to know, the path that you should pursue, the straight path, as-sirat al-mustaqim. And then Allah says, alright, now do it. Go ahead and go do it. Go ahead and follow this path. And Ibn Taymiyyah, as our sister mentioned, that was his life. Anybody who knows, he was imprisoned, and he's a scholar that's probably going to come up during this conversation. He was imprisoned famously, and it didn't deter him, and he continued to live a life and and produce and so on. So the knowledge requires a second necessary step. In order to become liberated by the knowledge, and in this sense we're talking about ilm. Ilm, when used alone, refers to Islamic knowledge, that which brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your journey in this life. Knowledge is not enough alone. It requires that you act upon it. And the reason being is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the alternative. When you receive some knowledge, or you see injustice, Allah refers to any kind of evil in this world, which the greatest of which is to reject your Creator, and reject your purpose in life, and reject where you came from and where you're going, and following through with every other evil that we know. Injustice to another created being, injustice to the environment, to animals, etc. The entire spectrum. It's all dhulm. It's all evil and oppression. Allah tells us those who receive knowledge and see something wrong, some injustice happening, and choose to either ignore it, or worse, the worst level you can possibly be is to what? If you ignoring it is evil enough, what's the lower than ignoring it?
Watching it happen and not doing anything about it.
Well, that's ignoring it. You don't have to raise your hand, just call it out.
Being the cause of it.
Being the cause of it, or justifying it. Let's say you weren't, because you saw that justice happening, so you weren't the cause of it in this sense. But you've justified it. You've used the knowledge that you have. Let me see how I can make this, seem okay to the people. Let me play around with these words and say that this is what God actually wants. And this is the true path to Allah. Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah number 174, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَكْتُمُونَ مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْكِتَابِ وَيَشْتَرُونَ بِهِ ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا أُولَٰئِكَ مَا يَأْكُلُونَ فِي بُطُونِهِمْ إِلَّا النَّارَ وَلَا يُكَلِّمُهُمُ اللَّهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ وَلَا يُزَكِّيهِمْ وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. Surah number 2, ayah number 174. Allah says, truly those who conceal what Allah has sent down from the book and exchange it for a small price. In other words, they cover up the truth in exchange for some small fee or some benefit, tiny benefit in this dunya. They don't consume anything into their stomachs except the fire. Whatever they're eating, whatever price they are extracting from concealing the truth of Allah, it is all hellfire. And Allah will not speak to them on the day of resurrection, nor will He purify them, and they will have a painful punishment. We ask Allah Ta'ala to protect us from that. So, knowledge leads to freedom if you follow it up with action. And that's what brings us to our topic today, which is imprisoned scholars. And those who, in general, if we broaden it a little bit more than just imprisoned scholars, those who face consequences for standing up for al-haq, the truth, justice. And one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-haq, the truth. Also al-adl, the just, or the eternally just, the one through which all justice is derived. So if knowledge leads to freedom and knowledge leads to power, as we spoke about it earlier, then those who are most powerful in terms of their minds and their souls and their spirits, and those who are most free, in reality, if you look at it outside of the boundaries of this limitation of our physical world, those who are most free are those who are most knowledgeable and act upon it in truth. Correct? And they're the truly free. And they are understanding freedom as it's supposed to be understood in this dunya. Not in our very limited ways in which we are manipulated every day by those in power and oppressors and so on. They take your limited understanding of the world and use it to manipulate you and put you in camps and put you in classes and divide you by race and ethnicity and so on. When in reality, if you all understood the power that we had, if we all understood the power that we had, they wouldn't be able to do this. So, it leads us to another question. When we think about imprisoned scholars, people who are facing oppression, who continue to stand out and speak for the truth, who continue to use the knowledge that they've gained by Allah's blessing and permission, and deal with whatever comes their way, as a result of speaking the truth. Where do they get their power from? Where do they get their strength, their resilience? Faith, their faith. Iman. What else? If you think about as an individual, let's say a scholar you know, somebody you know from history, somebody you know who was assassinated. Give me some names of people, influential figures in Islamic history who you look up to, who have faced consequences for doing what they did. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. I heard a name.
Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali.
Imam Malik.
Imam Malik. Malcolm X. Sisters. Somebody you look up to who faced suffering for the truth that they stood by. Sumayyah, radiallahu anha, the very first martyr of Islam. They had knowledge and they refused to let it go. And it cost them their life. You know, we ask Allah Ta'ala to accept it. And Allah has accepted them. What else we got?
All the prophets.
All of the prophets, every single last one of them. They received the light of Allah and they had to struggle to defend it. Yes, sister?
I forget exactly the names of the political figures, but like they're good Muslims, and there's always like the evil and the bad ones, like the government that would like jail them and not allow them to have the power and jail them just for that, for the reason of like I know one that just recently passed away from Algeria. He wanted like this political, he wanted to have like an Islamic like a way of political campaign. But ever since the government found out about it, because he was being successful and he was going to win, ever since the government found out about it, they jailed him and they put the one in power that's like not good.
Allah. And Jazakumullah khair for mentioning the ones that we don't know their names, because in a similar thought, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ mentions in a hadith that we don't know their names, but Allah does. And yeah, there's countless throughout history, countless people who have stood up, who have taken the knowledge they know, and taken the truth that they stood by and stood up for it, and maybe were killed or maybe were in prison. And we're not going to know all their names in the list over here. But that's irrelevant. Who cares if people are mentioning you? And it's always interesting to me when people who don't really believe in an akhirah, they don't believe in an afterlife, they don't believe in an extension of our existence, and they mention things like, what will you be remembered for? And I hear this often like in the world, like the business world, or even just like in a Western sense when they're trying to motivate people to do good. And they're trying to come without any spirituality involved because they have to appeal to a broader audience. And they mention, what would you be remembered for? What would you want people to mention your name after you die? And I always think like, if I were to disconnect from Islam and my belief in an afterlife and where things are going after, I couldn't care less what people are saying after I die. Like, what value would it add to your life if there's no akhirah, there's no benefit to the actions that you're doing, and you believe in atheism and no God and so on and so forth, and someone says, oh yeah, you passed away 1,000 years ago, and 2019 there's a bunch of people on the second floor in New York mentioning your name. I don't care. I don't care what they're saying. They say good, they say bad. What relevance could it possibly have to you, correct? However, we believe in akhirah, and it's very important that we differentiate between, obviously we believe in niyyah as Muslims, right? And anything without niyyah is wasted. And anything with the improper or agenda-driven or incorrect niyyah, insincere niyyah is worse than wasted. So we don't necessarily care about, are they going to mention my name from an ego standpoint? But it is, what kind of legacy are you leaving behind as a Muslim? All these names we just mentioned. They left behind the legacy that there's power to the fact that hundreds, if not thousands of years later, it's 2019, it's New York City, it's Brooklyn, it's second floor, and there's an entire group of people here benefiting, gaining strength, gaining motivation to move forward, gaining ability and strength, and holding. They receive the torch from you, and they get the strength to pass it on to someone after them, inshallah, through your mention, through your story, through the efforts that you put. That's power. And that's where, again, the same thing of knowledge is power, when it's followed by action properly. So, some of the reasons why scholars and those who hold on to the truth, they get the power that they have, they get the resilience and the strength to deal with things that when you think of just the story, you say, how could they stand up to so much? Even very often when they were given the option, they are told, hey, if you drop what you believe in, we're going to stop doing what we're doing, right? We know all these stories come up. Sumayyah, radiallahu anha, Imam Ahmad, radiallahu alayhi, when he was in prison, they just told him, hey, just stop. And he said, I can't stop, I won't stop what I'm saying. And he was an older man. And they said, just stop doing stop saying what you're saying. Say what we would like you to say, and we're just going to be done with it. And he said, if I do that, what about all those people? People used to wait outside where he was being imprisoned. and just waiting to see what the result, is he going to cave? And he said, how could I do that? How could I let all these people learn the wrong thing? And what consequences will that have after me? Not because of ego or any of that nonsense. It was because he truly believed in what he was holding on to. And by Allah's blessing, we ask Allah Ta'ala to accept, he passed it on. And we are living proof of that. He passed on the baton, he passed on the torch, and now it is our turn to pass it on, to hold on to it, and be strong, resilient, and pass it on to those who come after us. By Allah's blessing, we ask Allah to give us strength. Another reason they were able to gain, to have the strength to carry on and to deal with the repercussions is because again, knowledge gives you a broader view. When you don't have ilm, you can only see just a few feet ahead of you. The more knowledge you gain, you start seeing further and further and further. You have basira, foresight. And you start seeing, like we said, you read histories, you read the prophecies from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you know that they are fact and they are true and they will come to pass. So you have guarantees about the future. You have guarantees about the future in this dunya and in the akhirah, especially, where it matters. So a person who can only see in this very tiny worldview of the next 60 years until I die, if I even live that long, this person is making all their decisions based on this tiny box that they see the whole world in. This is everything, right? Imagine somebody who lives, in an apartment, and every decision that they make is based on this little tiny apartment. When they go to buy furniture, no, it has to fit in here. They're not thinking about what about in 5-10 years if I, if I make an effort and I'm living somewhere bigger, or I have to move and so on. This is the only thing they understand about the world. Versus somebody who understands there's a vast, and we're talking about dunya wal akhirah. There's a vast eternity in terms of time, in terms of space, in terms of everything. So they're not planning just for the next 30-40 years, these imams and these scholars and these leaders who are like, yeah, I'm going to be here for X number of years, and I don't even have a guarantee for that. But what is guaranteed for me is مَا هُوَ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى, the afterlife which is better and everlasting. So whatever pleasures, temporary pleasures I may get in this dunya by succumbing or failing or giving up, even that is superseded or is bested by what's waiting in the akhirah if I were to go down the right path and have discipline and work ethic and work towards what's good. So they have tul al-nadar or wad al-nadar, they have foresight and they can see further. They say, you know what, why would I throw away eternity for a tiny piece here? Why not work during this tiny segment so I can have eternity? So that they have further vision, and that is because of the knowledge that they seek. And we often ask ourselves, and that question comes all the time, like, I've been trying to practice, I've been trying to pray, I've been trying to take my deen seriously and so on, and it gets hard. You know how at the very beginning you have a certain amount of excitement and everything's easy. And you're waking up for salah without anybody prompting you, and in fact you're motivating others. And then that'll last a certain amount of time. And that's your zeal, your human zeal about something new, a novel idea. But then you're human, and it's okay to expect this. Don't bring it on, but when it starts coming, say, okay, no, I expected this was going to happen. You're no longer as excited to wake up and for Fajr time on time. You're 10 minutes late now, not 10 minutes past this time, hopefully, inshallah. But you used to wake up before the time, and you pray 2 rakat qiyam. And yeah, it goes up and down. You're supposed to understand that this is a journey, and this is the part of discipline. And this knowledge, one of the ways, which goes back to the question I was saying, someone says, how can I get that strength back? How can I have the motivation? I read these stories, and these were true, real human beings who dealt with so much more than having to wake up for Fajr in the cold. It feels cold and so on. And make wudu, wait an extra minute for the water to heat up. And they had to go to prison. And they were given the choice. It's different when you're tossed into prison, and it's like you have a 10-year sentence and that's that. Versus what happened to so many of these leaders of ours, they were told, hey, as soon as you give up, you're free. Right? So every day that choice, should I give up today? Should I give up today? Versus when you got a 10-year sentence, you give up today, give up tomorrow, doesn't matter. You're finishing the 10 years. So that made a decision for you. In a sense, it might be easier, in a sense. So you ask yourself, how did they find that strength, that courage, that resilience? It's because they weren't looking at these 10 years only, or whatever number, or whatever it was. They were making decisions based on a much bigger pie, a much bigger reward, much bigger worldview. And that, in comparison, that tiny piece, that's all we can see, that was like, yeah, but that's one factor. You know how, for some people, like let's say you're going to move, you got a new job in a new city, and there's all these factors, it's better in this case, it's better in that case, and then somebody, all they can see is the weather. They say, yeah, but the weather's not so great over there. You say, yeah, but there's A, there's B, there's C, there's D. They're like, yeah, but the weather. You say, yeah, I factored in the weather. It's 10% of my decision, and I've made a decision. And you're like, yeah, but how are you going to get over the weather? So somebody, that's all they can see. That's all they're making decisions based on. You said, okay, I got the weather situation, figured it out, but everything else overrode or overrides the weather situation. And then somebody who can't see that far is just going to be stuck there. So they had further vision and they could see a lot further than those who are limited. And that teaches us that as we get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as one of the tabi'een being the companions of the Sahaba, so the generation that came right after the Prophet ﷺ, he passed away, and then the generation of the Prophet ﷺ are called companions or Sahaba, just a translation. And then their followers were called tabi'een, which means followers, and that generation, that's the term that is given for them. So one of them, as he was speaking to like a Persian emperor or leader and so on, and he asked them, what do you guys want? What is it you Muslims want? Like, we don't find you don't follow the patterns of other nations we've had conflicts with, where it's like a certain type of wealth, we can give you that. A certain type of power, we can give you that. He said, very powerfully, we are here to extract people from servitude of servants, like themselves, to the servitude of the one who created all the servants. And we are here to extract them from the dunya, from the confinement, the narrowness of a worldview based only on dunya, to si'at al-dunya wal-akhirah, to the expansiveness, how wide it would be to have a worldview that encompasses dunya and akhirah. So they didn't say drop your dunya and go become in a monastery in a mountain or so on and so forth. They said no, it's so narrow to look at the world in just dunya terms. We want people to see it dunya and akhirah terms, so they can succeed in both. And that way you can make decisions based on all the factors involved. And that way, when you see the world that way, and we ask Allah Ta'ala to give us that basira, that insight, your decisions start to parallel the decisions of these scholars and these great people. And you start to say, I'm starting to see how they were thinking. And I'm starting to see how they made their decisions. Maybe we're not there yet. And only sometimes, you just got to keep working at it and keep making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you strength and resilience in times of difficulty, because you don't know how you're going to fare. And the Prophet ﷺ taught us that Allah said, أَنَا عِنْدَ حُسْنِ ظَنَّ عَبْدِي بِي. I am as my servant expects of me, or I am as my servant expects of me best. So expect the best from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, expect that He will give you strength, but seek that strength. Don't have false hopes and false dreams. Because everybody goes through difficulty in this world, and everybody will be tested. Which leads us to my last 2 points, inshallah. Allah says, in the Quran, أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون ولقد فتنا الذين من قبلهم فليعلمن الله الذين صدقوا وليعلمن الكاذبين. Surah Al-Ankabut, Surah number 29, ayah number 2 and 3. Allah says, do the people think that they will be left to say we believe and they will not be tested? We tested those before them, and Allah will certainly know those who are true from those who are false. So everybody goes through a test in this dunya. So make dua that Allah strengthens you. Nobody lives an easy life throughout their entire life. Your faith will be tested at some point or the other, but Allah will give you the strength to succeed in those tests. And we ask Him to give us that strength, but it requires that you do those two things. You seek knowledge and you follow it up with action. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. My last and final point, inshallah, a question. Why do they imprison scholars? We mentioned imprison scholars, imprison figures and so on. Why? Who's they, first of all? Why do they imprison scholars? Who's they?
Like the government or the kings and like royalty.
Governments, kings, royalty, what else? Who else is they?
Oppressive governments, specifically dictators, tyrants, people who want to remain in control.
Okay, so more specifically oppressive leaders, dictators, tyrants, people, if you were to, we gave examples of them, tyrants, dictators, leaders, you can just categorize it as people who want to maintain or take control. Anything to add, sisters?
I think they know that the power is with the scholars, so they know if the scholars are outside, they will lighten the people, and they will look for their rights, and they don't want that because they want to control.
Okay, excellent. So we understand who they are. So now why do they imprison scholars? Because they see the power. Knowledge is power, and they see it. When you think of a scholar, the image that comes to your head, somebody maybe, whether you're thinking modern, they're wearing they're in academia, they're in college or universities, whatever, wearing a suit, or you're thinking traditionally, they're in the robes or whatever, and you don't think of something aggressive. You're not thinking of somebody, with a sword in their hand and ready to fight and ready to drop bombs and so on. You're thinking of somebody humble, right? And scholars should be humble. But yet, knowledge is power. And you look at this humble person and say, wow, there's a lot to learn about. This person has done, is good to others, good for the community. And an oppressive ruler, a dictator, looks at that scholar and sees they fear them. And that's the truth. And they'll paint it as much as they want to paint it. No, come on, we don't care about these. These are a bunch of إِنَّ هَؤُلَاءِ لَشِرْذِمَةٌ قَلِيلُونَ, as Fir'aun said about Musa alayhi salam and his people. Oh, these are a bunch of, there's a ragtag, a bunch of nobodies. And meanwhile, he has his entire army chasing them to try to get rid of them. You just said they're nothing. You said they're qalilun. They're a tiny group of people. We'll get rid of them sooner or later. Yeah, your actions show what you truly believe. Is that you feared these people beyond any other fear you had. And that's why you worked up. You were killing babies, for God's sake. Fir'aun was killing babies, literally. No metaphor, they were killing babies. Because of their fear of what this tiny little group of nobodies will do to them. So they say one thing, but in reality they feel another. So they fear the power. They fear that when people are enlightened, يريدون أن يطفئوا نور الله بأفواههم والله متم نوره ولو كره الكافرون. Allah says they wish to extinguish the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with their mouths through what they say and through all their efforts, and Allah will guarantee that His light will continue, to be implemented. So they wish to extinguish that light by any means, and they see that those who carry knowledge of the path to Allah, those who carry the knowledge of the straight path, they carry that light. As you mentioned, you imagine they carried that torch, they kept it lit during their lives, and they had to sacrifice from their own comforts, their own efforts to make, and their own life to make sure that that light stays lit. They did, and then they passed it on to those who came after them. They fulfilled their task and their duty during their short stay in this dunya, and then it becomes the duty of those who pick up that torch after them. And many say, you know what, not interested, and they drop it. And that's a burden, or that's a decision that they will have to answer for on the day of judgment. We ask Allah Ta'ala to give us the strength that those before us had. So they fear the truth. They fear that people who are subjugated, people who are weak, people who are attacked, will say, will hear something and say, you know what, that does make sense. You know what, I don't have to live this lifestyle. Why am I living, why is our country resource rich and I'm living a poverty lifestyle? Why do my kids not have the opportunities that these people's kids have, even though we're all the same and we share the same resources and we should be on the equal level? They fear that people will hear that stuff. They fear that people will say, why are we worshipping these idols? Why are we worshipping like they're doing now to the Uyghur Muslims in China? We ask Allah Ta'ala to make it easy for them. They fear that these people will say, because they have an access to light, they have an access to the robe of Allah, and they say, these people are going to wake up, and they fear that power, because that power exists in every single human being, so they want to extinguish it in the easiest way that they think that they can. Which is the irony of it, is because so many of these influential figures that have been assassinated or imprisoned or otherwise harmed, one of the only reasons we know about them, obviously there's other factors and there's the barakah of Allah, but they amplified their voice by tossing them into prison. They made their voice reach further than it ever could have reached by assassinating them or by harming them in whatever way that they could. So subhanAllah, Allah says in the Quran that those who disbelieve will spend their wealth to try to be an obstacle or to basically stop the path of Allah from moving forward. And yet Allah says they will spend their wealth, they'll do it, they're going to keep trying. And then it will become a regret for them. And it won't work, and it will become a regret for them. Allah says in Surah Al-Anfal. Surah Al-Anfal, ayah number 36. So subhanAllah, it's ironic. They think they've controlled and they say, oh, you know what, we've got a plan here, we're going to silence this voice because it's going to take our power away, it's going to take our oppression away and so on. And whatever attempts they make, it ends up doing the exact opposite of what they had in mind. One last point that I want to mention is very important for each and every single one of us on an individual level, is the paradox when it comes to this entire concept. A paradox that we're all living in. I want you guys to pay attention. I know we're lending a voice to those who need it. Speaking out for al-haq, which again is one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when it comes to the oppression of kufr, when it comes to the oppression of subjugating another human being and so on and so forth, is that, here's the paradox. we fear speaking out because it makes us target, right? And it's going to cost us on an individual level, right? You might lose your job, you might lose opportunities, and as it progresses, you now might get imprisoned, you might get killed. We hear the stories and we know it happened to others. So you fear speaking out because of the consequences that will occur. Here's the problem. Throughout history, we have countless examples of entire nations and peoples and tribes and communities that didn't cause any trouble. They weren't stirring the pot, they weren't making waves, and they were oppressed wholesale. And forget, like, looking through history, look at now. The Uyghur Muslims in China, we just mentioned them, may Allah Ta'ala aid them and destroy the oppressors. Did you ever hear about them before now, their oppression? Did they make any trouble in the world? Did they bother anybody? Did you even know there were this many million Muslims in China? They haven't bothered a soul, and yet they're being oppressed wholesale, and they're being, thrown into concentration camps by the millions, with no excuse, and yet they were subjugated. What about the Rohingya Muslims in Burma? We ask Allah Ta'ala to aid them. Have you ever heard them making any trouble? Bothering anybody, making problems in the world? And yet they get harassed on a wholesale level, and they get attacked and burned alive and killed and so on by the thousands and the millions. So here the paradox is we fear standing up because it will bring negative consequences, and yet it is proven that if we all don't stand up, that will bring even worse negative consequences. And that nobody stood up for justice, and for whatever reason, I'm not laying blame on any communities, it's not my point here. The point is, if we all stay quiet, with our goal being, because we want to stay safe, it will lead us to lack of safety. And we will all be destroyed, and we will all be subjugated and stepped on. So, and here's the very end of the paradox, is that if we all used our voices and stood up for justice, we will all be safe. Because they can't bring everyone down, and they can't target everybody. So subhanAllah, we fear standing up because it will bring harm to us. But if we all don't stand up, we will all be harmed. And if we all stand up, we will all be safe from harm. So that's the little mess that we find ourselves in, and it requires that first step of courage, which we ask Allah Ta'ala to grant us that step of courage, to be a voice that stands up, and to be one that stands for others, because it's not always you who's in need. You might be not in need today, but you might be in need tomorrow for sure. In the same way that you would like somebody to stand up for you and add a voice to the voiceless when you're the voiceless, then do the same for others when they're in that situation now. So, think about that for a little bit. We ask Allah Ta'ala to bless our scholars around the world, those who are carrying the light of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, that amana, that trust, and passing it on to us. We ask Allah Ta'ala to give them strength, to give them ability, and to give them guidance. And we ask Allah Ta'ala to make us of those who have the strength and the knowledge, to give us curiosity for knowledge, and to make us always those who are willing to seek ilm, and to get closer to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, and to be of those who spread it to others as well. Jazakumullah khairan. And with that, we will pass it on to Sheikh Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum everybody. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I'm going to keep this under 15 minutes, inshallah, just to open the floor to questions before I have to run out. Jazakallah khair Muhammad, he built up nicely to what I told him I was hesitating but interested in speaking about, which is the idea of knowing when to speak up, and the idea of building up the ummah collectively till we become that, they call it a critical mass, where you move forward and you can't be obstructed anymore, right? We become an ummah that can be an ummah of self-determination. We determine our destiny, per se, right? Inshallah, but we do determine for ourselves where we want to charge, where we want to go, and where we want to stop. And so I want to mention to you an incident quickly that happened in Islamic history that is not refuting all that he said, but just to help bring some balance into the picture as well, so that we can assume the best of our scholars who do not speak truth to power on a dime, the dime that we choose to throw whenever we feel like it. Okay? One of the greatest scholars of Islamic history was going to get executed. Okay? The scholar the ummah depends on the most. Okay? He's irreplaceable. And so before the government executed him, another scholar approached and appealed and tried to talk the government out of executing. And so the government did what? Okay, but we have to make sure he doesn't stir an uprising, and so you have to show the people that he was religiously wrong for doing what he did, saying what he said. So what do you mean? He said, we will not kill him on the condition that you whip him in public. I want to put you guys in this second scholar's shoes. What would you do? How many of you would let the scholar die a martyr and be celebrated in the history books? How many of you would whip him in public? The rest of you are just going to sign on to Instagram and enjoy it. There was no Instagram back then.
Can you repeat the situation?
The situation.
Can you repeat it?
The greatest scholar of the Ummah is going to be executed, and the only way to save him is for you to whip him in public in front of everybody. It's difficult, right?
No, it's not.
So what this scholar chose to do was to accept the lesser of the two evils. So you know what? I'd rather whip him in public and be humiliated for it. He went down for the rest of his life as the sellout, right? The guy who succumbed to government and sold out his hereafter for some rich guy's dunya. Those lines, right? The accusatory lines. So that he could save for this ummah its greatest scholar. What do you think of that? Isn't that admirable? Isn't that something you should really, really admire? You know, some of our scholars, they used to say, Al-hayatu fi sabilillah as'abu min al-mawti fi sabilillah. That living for the sake of Allah is harder than dying for the sake of Allah. Meaning truly living for the sake of Allah. Like, in this moment, like, you know, if I were to choose to lay out the greatest sacrifice for God, what would it be? It would be give up my life for God, per se, right? It's the most valuable thing I have. But giving up your life is a moment of courage, right? A moment of determination. But to live truly, though, that's the caveat, truly for the sake of Allah is an entire lifetime of sustaining that courage. A lifetime of sustaining that faith, that conviction, that sacrifice. Because this guy did not just get slaughtered in court, right, the second scholar. He did something so much harder than that. He got dragged through the mud, as they say, in the court of public opinion. You know, the court of public opinion, everyone looks at you like you're the loser. He accepted to be considered by the world the loser, the sellout, the traitor, the monster, the this, the that, for the sake of what? For the sake of the people that are tearing him down now. He did it all for them. Is there any other, you know, display of sincerity to this ummah, loyalty to this ummah that is greater than that? And also, by the way, the opposite. Sometimes a person can take a stand of speaking truth to power and go to prison for a short while or a long while or whatever it is for the wrong reasons, right? You get it, yes? Am I making sense? To be a hero. There are people that fight in the path of Allah outwardly, and the Prophet ﷺ says they get nothing. They're doing it for fame. They're making a sacrifice that looks like it's for Allah, but it's not. So that's the ugliest act. And there are times that when people refuse to fight or refuse to take a stand, refuse to sacrifice, even though they know it's going to cost them so much in the eyes of the world, for the right reasons, in a way that is very noble in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They commit social suicide basically, by not speaking truth to power in the name of the ummah for the sake of protecting this ummah. And so, that's the first thing I want you to always keep in mind. Sometimes these scholars that you're expecting to speak up and you're wondering why don't they speak up, maybe, I'm not saying for sure, right? They're humans too, they have weaknesses, but maybe it is their sincerity and their honesty to their principles that they're not going to allow the people to bully them into saying something that they know is going to hurt the ummah, right? They have foresight. They're not going to allow their passion and their burning for this ummah to get better to convince them in that hallucination that there's a quick fix for the ummah, because there's no quick fix. You guys get me? You know, Umar ibn Khattab, radiallahu anhu, he sent, when he first became Khalif, he was the first person he appointed. He appointed a man by the name of Abu Ubaid ibn Mas'ud al-Thaqafi, Abu Ubaid al-Thaqafi. Abu Ubaid al-Thaqafi led the Muslim army, and with him were senior companions. He told him, don't do anything without consulting the senior companions. Okay? So basically, he was challenged by the Persian Empire, and so he said, I'm not going to wait for them to come to me, I'm going to go to them, we're not afraid. They're saying we're afraid, we're not afraid. And so he ignored the counsel of the senior Sahaba, and he said, we're marching. And so they started marching across the bridge between them and the playing field where the fight would happen, or they assumed the fight would happen. They would be able to get all of them in time. His haste and his rush compromised his ability to calculate, and the Persians cut the bridge. And 1,800 of them died or drowned that day. When Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh heard of this, he said, listen, a people will never succeed when they are blinded by their passions to die shaheed. That actually rhymes in English, doesn't it? I didn't mean that. A people will never succeed if they're blinded by their passion for martyrdom. They're blinded by their passion. Oh, I can't wait to die shaheed. Right? Sure, that's it's beautiful to want to lay down your life for God for the right reasons in a way that God is permitting. It's a beautiful, valiant sacrifice. And this, no one needs to feel uncomfortable about me like incentivizing jihad or anything, okay? Like, it's fighting for a just cause. The justice cause is the cause that is delineated by the most just, right? In our country, those that die for what they consider just causes, we build monuments for them, right? They made the greatest sacrifice for the just cause. So don't get uncomfortable. There's nothing shameful about any aspect of your Islam. When contextualized, when understood properly. So he said, like, they were done in, they hurt the Muslims because of what? They were bubbling with a passion to die shaheed. You know, one of the greatest tragedies, I have 7 minutes. One of the greatest tragedies to happen in the history of this ummah was what? The killing of Al-Hussein radiallahu ta'ala, the grandson of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is hardly a more difficult incident for you to read in the history books than this incident. May Allah Azza wa Jalla be pleased with them and allow us to see them in Jannah. Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu, the Sahaba were telling him, you're doing the right thing. You are supposed to stand against it, just not now, not yet. And Abdullah ibn Umar, one of the greatest Sahaba of the scholars of the Sahaba, he was begging him as he was leaving to go fight in Al-Kufa. He was begging him, please, Wallahi lan takuna lakum. You will not be able to. Don't do it. And Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu was confident enough that the promises he was getting from the people of Kufa, that city in Iraq, were solid. That they really are going to stand by us and fight down to the last man. But that was a miscalculation that many people foresaw. Many people foresaw, but Hussein radiallahu ta'ala, his passion for justice did not allow him to heed that. And so when he went, all the people of Kufa walked away. And he was there all by himself. Radiallahu ta'ala anhu arda. So that's the idea. Like when you want a scholar to speak truth to power, right? He's going to fear only Allah. Then they're going to grab him and throw him in prison. Not you, the guy you were talking about. They're going to grab him and throw him in prison. And then what's going to happen? You guys are all going to go back to work on Monday. Right or wrong?
Right.
So what's going to happen? You just hit pause on the da'wah for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Congratulations. Right? Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. That's what happens all the time. Say, what's wrong with you people? Why are you silent? Then they speak up, they all get thrown in prison, and we just go to work and school on Monday. That's what happens. It really is. You know? I mean, do you still retweet about the person that you were retweeting about every 4 hours when the day he got arrested? No, that's it, you're done. The cycle, 72 hours, is over. Maybe one person or two people of particular interest to you, you'll retweet about their court dates every 4 months, right? What's a retweet going to do? That's the whole idea. The idea of pressing the scholars to ignore what they know for how the masses feel is us being unreasonable. And to assume bad of them, like, during all the political mess in the Arab Spring, people were telling the scholars, like, why aren't you guys speaking? Whoever doesn't speak is like a shaitan al-akhlas, like a mute shaitan. A shaitan who just, isn't opening his mouth. Meaning he has to, I agree that he shouldn't say anything wrong. Okay, he shouldn't mislead the ummah. But he doesn't necessarily have to object to something wrong. He shouldn't justify evil. I'm coming to you. He shouldn't justify evil. But for him to object, when the objection will come back with greater harm than good, this would be ridiculous, right? Because Allah obligated you with enjoining good and forbidding evil. So if you can't, what you got to do is maximize the good, minimize the evil. But what's the point of me removing some evil if it's going to result in what? Greater evil. And what I want to say is, it is very discretionary. Like every person has their own read on things. Some people know history better than each other. Some people know Islamic law better than each other. So let us say he's wrong. Okay? Let us say the scholar is wrong. But he sincerely believed he was right. Just leave him alone. Right? You know, other times also, we assume that scholars know how to talk about politics. And that's just not their discipline. Like one time, I don't want to give you I'll spare you the background story. Someone was like, Sheikh, jazakallah khairan. You know, like you speaking about Palestine and Al-Quds. I didn't know it was a very heavy Palestinian message. They loved me for it. The whole khutbah was about Gaza and Al-Aqsa. But he's like, the guy last week, he was this, that. I was like, Akhi, just, what if he would have gotten your masjid some really bad press because he doesn't know how to navigate this conversation? Don't many times people get pushed, scholars get pushed into talking about subjects, and then when they talk about them without the aptitude, the know-how, the skills to talk about them, it becomes like a PR mess. Should we care about a PR mess? We should care about a PR mess. Because the Prophet ﷺ said that. He said, oh Umar, don't, because I don't want the people saying Muhammad killed his companions. Right? We want people to hear the true message of Islam. That's also part of the major objectives of our deen. Sorry, go.
Okay, so they should stay quiet to make da'wah?
No. So I'm not saying they should or they shouldn't. I'm saying if they, because this is like who is they and what is should and when and how. What I'm saying, there's so many variables that we just need to humble ourselves a little bit. Let's not be overly simplifying things and romanticize, like Muslims that want to be weirdos. I used to be one of them. I'm not sure I might be still one of them. Be nice, don't tell me. Every time someone tells him, bro, just relax, you're being a weirdo. He says, Islam began strange and will return to being something strange. It actually reinforces in him that he's doing the right. But Islam didn't say deliberately choose to be the weirdo. This hadith means if you must, then don't shy away from being unique. Embrace that adversity and Allah will make you shine. Fine. Same thing with the issue of shahada and imprisonment and stuff. It is not a goal in and of itself. It is just because Allah Azza wa Jal is telling us in reality there's going to be times when the history of this ummah will only be charted, will only be written by the ink of the scholar and the blood of the martyr. It's just reality. But don't get off your high horse when you're judging people because people think all you need to do is just say a few words and the scholars will just speak up. No, I'm sorry, it doesn't work like that. I don't have enough time, you're so lucky. Who said that if we just speak against this oppressor or this dictator, the problems of the ummah are going to be solved? We think the problem of the ummah is just there's some dictators on the top, right? Some political problem. It's not the problem of the ummah, right? This guy's not talking about the Muslims that are in this place and that place. He can't speak about these things. He cannot. Okay? And if you did, you wouldn't help the ummah at all. You would send the ummah back, right? When you try to pick a fight that you can't handle, what happens? You get pulverized. Is it in the interest of the ummah to get pulverized? One guy was saying this guy's a traitor, this, that, and the third. Why? Because he's not like that guy who's picking a fight with this country and that, the biggest ballers in the world, right? The international community. One sheikh, Allah, he said something very beautiful. He says, do you hear yourself? He goes, what country are you from? I told him, X country. He said, listen to me. You don't own the codes of your own planes. You want your country to be like the Superman of the Ummah that's going to go out around and save the Ummah, and the only problem is this little dictator that we need to get rid of. You don't know the codes to your planes. You're dependent on that bully that you want to start a fight with, but he owns the code to your planes. You haven't invented anything. So our problem is not a problem of government. That's way down the line. Our problem, as the brother mentioned, is a problem of education, a problem of literacy, a problem of morality. To be very honest, a problem of religion. That our religion has been reduced to a cultural identity. It's not a God-centered, rigorous religious identity. Once we do that, it will reflect in our morality, and it will reflect in our ihsan, and we will actually start developing ourselves in a way that will make us people of determination. So that we will care enough so that when the scholar does speak, everybody's speaking, echoing what he says. Right? You see, that's the whole thing. A long time ago, these scholars spoke truth to power and it worked. Why? Because everybody was aligned. You get it? They didn't go back to work on Monday. You understand? Everybody was aligned. Al-Izz ibn Abd Salam, the country walks out after him and says, no, you're not going to leave. And that's why he was called Sultan al-Ulama. Because he had more influence than the Sultan. The scholars that are in prison today have some influence. I'm not disagreeing with this. But their influence is curtailed because the critical mass hasn't been built yet. I'm not saying they shouldn't speak truth to power. I'm saying when they believe and see, and they're otherwise dignified, loyal scholars, their track record speaks for it, don't make this the determining factor. I know people like this. If you're not that person, I'm not talking about you. If you haven't been to prison, you're not a true scholar. I know people who say that. It's like, what? Like, because Allah spared this guy for the past 50 years to teach us what Allah and His Messenger said 4 days a week. That's something we should be upset about? Like, who made that one of the tests? Right? Khalid ibn Walid didn't die martyr, did he? Right? Allah spared him for another wisdom. Anyway, that was my rant. Now everybody can disagree with me because I need to leave anyway, so it's fine. Please.
I hate to interrupt, I just want to definitely hit this question of, so are you saying we should stay silent in power, especially with, so we coordinate our talks, it wasn't that, the idea is to cover both angles and give a balanced understanding, and hopefully inshallah, in the short time that we have. So it's not about stay silent. The person who's choosing not to speak on a particular topic at the moment, if you otherwise, again, Sheikh Muhammad said, if you otherwise see every other good sign from this person, that they seem to be doing great, they seem to be sincere, they seem to be making a lot of effort and a lot of change in other factors of the ummah, or other factors of integrity and morality and ethics in our community, but there's something nagging on you, and this is usually when you're a bit younger, when you start reading a lot about politics in our ummah, you say, just like I've heard that with my own ears plenty of times, if they're not going to prison or under threat of being in prison, they're not real scholars. Dismiss. And those are the kind of people who are in a stage in their life when they're really excited by those Facebook guys who wear the turbans, and they're like, it's all yelling, the volume stays up here and that's the only volume they understand. And it's really exciting. It's like, yeah, you got me all worked up. But it's just like Sheikh Muhammad mentioned, is that that's also an image, and be careful, because that it could be value, it could have substance, but very often it's a lot of fluff with not a lot of substance. And the challenge that I say is that no, it doesn't mean they should be silent, but some of them, and as you're very, very well familiar, in Egypt and in Saudi, I studied in Saudi, people ask me all the time, Sheikh Fulan, like I hear a lot of his great things and so on, but how come he's silent? How come he's on the committee for XYZ? And I'm like, yeah, would you rather you said you've heard like lectures from him and he sounds great and so on, and you wonder why he's on the committee for this? Because if he wasn't there, some government scholar who's just going to okay everything the government says would be there. He's fulfilling a need, teaching millions and upon millions of people. He sees this as an indirect route, the same way that we mentioned Al-Hussein, Al-Imam Al-Hussein, radiyallahu anhu. Sahaba at the moment disagreed with him. Great Sahaba. And they said, don't do it, we're not going to follow with you. So were they government scholars? Were they refusing to speak truth to power? There's different approaches to these kind of things. They're still, make it very clear, they're still making an effort in their way. Maybe their vision of, after all their fiqh and their studying, they said, the only way this ummah will come together is if we work from the ground up. There are hundreds upon thousands of scholars who feel this way, and people of knowledge and people of goodness and integrity. Our Mass Youth Center over here is the fact that we're here, and doing this, and we're not at a political rally for Kashmir. It's, that happens, but it's not every day. It's not all we're focused on, because we believe, every single person here, that what we're doing right now, this conversation that we're having, or when we learn about fiqh once a week, or tahara or wudu, that's part and parcel of this ummah becoming enlightened. That's part and parcel of your neighbor learning about the justice of Islam and growing in that direction. And one last thing I say, and inshallah I'll let Sheikh take questions, is very importantly, and this is something that, alhamdulillah, I hope that may Allah grant us wisdom. When I was a bit younger, and like these kind of like attacks always happen to people that you respect and you see integrity in. A challenge that always made me feel sheepish and made me feel like, oh yeah, small, was when someone says, okay, this scholar or this person that you respect otherwise, but you're doubting because of, they haven't mentioned, during the Arab Spring, I remember, like they're not on the front lines of the Arab Spring, and they'll mention those scholars in their social media, whatever, that I support the cause and blah, 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 and so on, but I have some reservations. People say, oh yeah, well, sell out. You tell them, listen, spend 1 year, I won't say a day, because people can do a day. When this person has been doing 30, 40, 50 years of daily putting in the legwork for this ummah. Legwork. Unthanked legwork. They go teach lessons, they go attended lessons for years and years, they teach lessons, they've helped hundreds, if not thousands of people, if not millions, change their ways, become more moral, become more ethical, stop cheating on their spouses, stop being abusive in their households, become better at, give hundreds of millions in donations, and so on and so forth. they're putting in the daily legwork that's not thanked, that's not glamorous, that doesn't have cameras and whatever. People who criticize them put in a drop of their legwork and see how difficult that path is to be sincere, and it's not, it's a process. To understand that and to have foresight and say, you know what, I'm chipping away at it one piece at a time. That's, as Sheikh mentioned, living a life for Allah's sake is not the easiest thing in the world. And someone who has done it for years upon years upon years and continues to do it, don't write them off so easily. Because they're working at it from a different angle and they're essential. Every last one of us here knows how to make wudu and to pray. We all watch those YouTube videos of Sheikh Fulan. We don't know all their names, but we start admiring and saying, wow, I've learned so much from this person. And they're really miles away doing what they're doing and so on. So it's definitely to factor it all in. Well, I'll let Sheikh Muhammad take the questions.
So I know we have to close off soon, but I'm being a little bit of a dictator. I want to actually ask a question before we close off. So I understand, like, you guys make extremely valid points in terms of trying to seek that understanding and almost document to scholars that have so much time and effort, but sometimes goes against, let's say, like the activist community, what they essentially say. But I'm going to give like specific examples that I guess have been in a lot of conversations in the Muslim community lately. Scholars involved in counter violence extremism programs, or people that interact with these programs that subsequently lead to the political imprisonment of a lot of our brothers and sisters. So although we extend that rahmah to scholars, I feel like sometimes we also don't extend it back to the individuals that are making these accusations. So I just wanted to know what your thoughts on that are. And the second part of my question is, should we have some sort of political consensus in the Muslim community? Should we actually have like a legitimate conversation about what is wrong and what is right and what we should do when it comes to these complex political stances?
It's very difficult questions, but I just want to say one thing, that with regarding to political stances, right? The Sahaba had varying political stances. The earliest Tabi'een, the best generation, Al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah is who came to mind when Sheikh Abdul Rahman was speaking. He was very close to Al-Hajjaj. Al-Hajjaj was a bloodthirsty dictator who slaughtered some of the Sahaba themselves. And he was very close to him because he believed that was the only way to mitigate some of his harm. He saw from being close to him, yes, it's dangerous, but he believed that he could lessen the amount of harm this guy would dish out to the ummah by being close to him, right? And so let us not accuse people's intentions ever, and let us critique each other with respect and with regard for the sacrifice each of these veterans have made if they're veterans. We do admire people's passion in saying this is going to endanger the Muslim community. And you can be assertive with what you believe is true. But in general, political issues are not black and white ever, right? They're pros and cons, all of them, right? They're not black and white. So whether we're talking about CVE or MLI, I have my positions, but I will not allow myself, inshallah, to make an accusation or even an assumption within myself. I won't even let myself speak to myself about this person's religious commitment in light of that. If I know from so many other factors otherwise, their political stances will not do it for me, will not cause me to forget all of that. Okay? That's the short answer that I have. As for having a unified front, that's the million-dollar question, and that's the dream of the ummah and all this. And I'm hopeful that it will happen organically if we work from the grassroots. Okay? Because when work starts happening, people start catching up. I do believe this. Politics is always going to be controversial, and you guys are going to disagree with me, and that's fine. I'm just sharing my thoughts here, right? Who said I'm right?
So, going back to where the scholar who
With the other.
who wanted to whip the other scholar because he said something and then he's being oppressed. So, how is that going to make the ummah learn again if the other scholar committed or confirmed that what the scholar did is wrong, although he's not? So how is that going to help the ummah to learn and know the truth if the government has been controlled these thoughts? And also, as what's happening in Saudi Arabia today and Egypt as well, a lot of Jews are outside there, they're giving a lot of things, maybe they're being oppressed or something, but they're saying something in supporting the government, although they know they're wrong, but maybe because they want to be safe. But how is that going to save us and learn about deen, like learn about our deen, what Allah has commanded us to do. Although they are sincerely doing, they don't mean it, and etc., but how is it going to help us?
So that scholar that was whipped, the one who was whipped, who received the whipping, he increased in fame and he increased in influence by virtue of him getting whipped. What I'm saying is the one who agreed to whip him in order to save his life sacrificed himself. That's the only point I'm trying to cite here. Sacrificed himself for the sake of preserving this person for the ummah. He said he's more important than me. That's basically what he did. Okay? That's the only part. As for all the other factors, we know from a general rule, our Prophet ﷺ said that knowledge will continue being removed from this earth until people